Been another day of bitter disappointment for the people of Britain. Not all the people, of course, just the sensible ones. Believe it or not, there are some people who actually think stopping other people from paying gangsters to move to this country without permission is the wrong thing to do. Believe it or not, there are organisations in this country who actually think they should help people who arrive here illegally to ensure that they stay. They even advise them on how to do so, often giving them tips on the best way to game the system. There are other people in the Home Office, and this we know for a fact, who consider it their solemn duty not to assist any government that wishes to prosecute illegal migrants or to stop them from coming. And there are people in the Treasury who are still wedded to the idea that immigration is the answer to all our economic woes. In short, we have a massive machine in this country which appears to be working against its own people, the very people who elect governments to carry out our will, or at the very least their own election promises. What we've seen today with the Supreme Court's rejection of the Rwanda plan is the final cherry on the cake, the culmination of years of wearing away parliamentary sovereignty, the reduction of the will of the many to the subjugation of the few. Tonight we will investigate how it went so wrong in Britain and how we get back on the right track. We are not a nation of protesters. We don't burn police cars and smash up our communities when things don't go right. But we can simply no longer give up the ghost and admit defeat. Suella Braverman said that Rishi Sunak didn't have a plan B, and she's been proved right yet again. So over the next 2 hours, we'll hear from a host of great guests, including Isabel Oakeshott, the Telegraph's Madeline Grant, Lord Moylan and the Spectator's Andrew Tettenborn. We've got all the morning newspapers for you as well, and we'll be bringing you the latest from the world of woke. All that plus your calls, because that is what matters, your opinion, tonight and every night. 0344 499 1000. It's the Independent Republican, Mike Graham. Let's get it on. Now, I'm going to say a very good evening, first of all, to Isabel and Madeline. But before we do any of that, don't forget, you can get in touch with the show on all the socials at TalkTV and on the phones, 0344 499 1000. Calls will cost you the national rate. And let's have a look at what happened today. The Supreme Court has ruled the government's Rwanda deportation scheme cannot go ahead. The proposal was set to send illegal migrants in the UK to the African country. The government was appealing a previous ruling that said it was unlawful. But today, 7 judges agreed with that previous decision. President of the Supreme Court, Lord Reid, said it was in part because Rwanda has a poor human rights record.
In recent times, British police have had to warn Rwandan nationals living in the UK of credible plans by the Rwandan government to kill them. In 2021, the UK government criticised the Rwandan government for extrajudicial killings, deaths in custody, enforced disappearances and torture.
But ministers have vowed to press ahead, insisting they're already working on a new treaty and will change the law if necessary.
Nothing in the Supreme Court judgment today dims our commitment. We anticipated this judgment as a possible result, and for the last few months have been working on a plan to provide the certainty that the court demands. We have been working with Rwanda to build capacity and amend agreements with Rwanda to make clear that those sent there cannot be sent to another country than the UK.
Well, what do you make of all that? I'm going to get some clues now. Madeline Grant here, Telegraph columnist, and Isabel Oakeshott, our very own international editor. Welcome to both of you. A bit of a long intro, that, but by and large, I think we can mostly say that this is the biggest balls up this government have made yet, isn't it?
I mean, it's an absolute spectacular fiasco.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's all very well for Rishi Sunak to try to regain the initiative, to try to look like he's all dynamic and he's got a grip of this and he's got a grand plan.
He doesn't.
By saying that he's going to introduce emergency legislation. Hang on a minute, why didn't you introduce that legislation, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or your predecessor, because it is an emergency. So if it were that easy, they would have done it already. And, you know, look, the reality is they're just wasting time now, trying to sound as if they're doing something. I confidently predict that whatever emergency legislation they introduce, it won't work. There'll be more challenges and nobody will be deported to Rwanda. And I think voters are astonished to think that the integrity of our borders and our ability to deal with the migrant crisis rests on Rwanda's human rights record. It shouldn't rest on any such thing. It should rest on our own ability, for example, to turn back the boats with the use of our navy if it need be.
Well, Madeleine, listening to that bloke from the Supreme Court, it sounds like very dangerous to stay in London if you're from Rwanda as well, because apparently they're going to be... Maybe they should use that as the excuse to remove them. I don't know. But it is. I mean, we keep hearing these legal arguments which mean nothing to most ordinary people, right?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's a relatively new, recent way of doing politics where ultimate responsibility lies somewhere else that is not the Commons, that is not Parliament, that is not the democratic structures, but it is some kind of remote legalistic structure. And in fact, you know, the Supreme Court is a very recent innovation. I mean, it was brought in the late noughties under Blair, and yet it's always being spoke of as if, you know, this is absolutely inalienable, sort of like Magna Carta era. Yeah. And I think a lot of people will wonder, why is it that clearly every opportunity the British public has had to express a view on whether they want more immigration or less, or whether they want to see harsh action on illegal migration or weak, and they've made their position very clear, and yet the numbers have continued to rise for both legal and illegal migration. And, you know, it's as if we have a government that's kind of in office but not actually able to pull vital levers in public policy.
Isabel, we've got a machine in this country, haven't we, which goes from the Home Office to the legal business to politicians, to charities, to NGOs, to all sorts of, you know, groups of people who don't think...
up to trying to thwart it.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Even those that are ostensibly being paid by the government to do the precise opposite, i.e. the civil service, being paid by the taxpayer to carry out what we have elected the government to do and make happen. It is extraordinary that we are where we are with this, with this problem.
And it's not going to go anywhere. It's hard to imagine a bigger balls-up than what we have all just witnessed today, but it's nothing less than we have come to expect from this absentee government. And when I say absent, I mean it. All day we've been hearing from ministers and MPs from all sides of the migrant row, mumbling on about emergency legislation, spouting legal arguments for and against the ruling by the Supreme Court, and vowing to come up with new plans, all of which is so far so bleeding dull. What no one is doing is speaking up for the people of this country, because that's my job. Everyone knows that immigration is the single biggest issue that people in this country care about. It has been for as long as I've been sitting behind this microphone. And finally, it's only now that all the other media organisations have caught up. But despite all that, despite Rishi Sunak knowing that this one issue could win him the next election if he got it right, the Prime Minister seems incapable of seeing the wood for the trees. There are too many people coming to this country illegally. There are too many people staying in this country illegally after entering on the pretext of either a student or a work visa. And the effects of this immigration are plain for all to see. From the seafronts of the southeast coast towns in Kent and Sussex to the northern inner cities of Manchester and Leeds, illegal migrants roam the streets, are block booked into hotels and are changing the face of so many communities. These are not just words that politicians dare not speak. These are facts, plain and simple. Just look at the pro-Palestine marches going on in the streets. There's even one going on right now in London. Where were they in the 1970s when Israel was almost permanently at war? Where were they for the intifadas of the 80s and the 90s and for the 5-year version from 2000 to 2005? Well, they weren't here, were they? And that's because the numbers of people who are now anti-Israel weren't actually in Britain then. It's plain and simple. This nation of ours is at a very important crossroads. And at the moment, the man at the controls doesn't appear to know which way to turn. He seems frozen in the headlights of the oncoming juggernaut of multiculturalism. That's right. Rishi Sunak isn't prepared. He wasn't prepared for the Supreme Court Rwanda decision today, and everyone has agreed that his plan for emergency legislation will simply result in more dither, more delay, and another episode of kicking the can down the road. Suella Braverman was right about him. He's not fit for purpose. He's betrayed the British people, and it's time someone stood up to save the day.